Hi there, my name is David Bowers. I'm the tinplate cataloguer here at Vectis Toy Auctions up in the northeast of England in the UK. I've spoken to you before about various tinplate sales, and I thought you might be interested to know of one that we've got coming up on the 23rd of April this year, 2020. It's a very interesting sale. It's very varied, like so many of our sales. But this one features, amongst all the different toys, a Dander themed collection. Now, it occurred to me, because of the age of Dander, that many of us aren't really that familiar with him, although we may have heard of his name. So I'd just like to briefly give you a little bit of a potted history into Dander, and then we'll have a look at some of his toys. Back in the late 1940s, children, for their entertainment, they didn't have iPhones or even televisions and so on, but a lot of them finished up with American issues of comics in their hands. A Reverend Marcus Morris from Southport in Lancashire in England didn't like the idea of young children reading these magazines, and he decided he should make his own. He had a friend who was a part of his congregation at the local church called Frank Hampson, and Frank was a brilliant illustrator and very well trained, and between them they came up with the idea of a magazine that would appeal to children who would, let's face it, who'd been through World War II and needed some sort of direction. They came up with the idea of a magazine, and it was Frank's wife who saw the lectern in the church was shaped like an eagle, so she suggested the idea of eagle. They hawked this mock-up of the eagle comic around various publishers in London, and eventually the Hulton Press came up with the goods. They were very interested in it and made an excellent job of the publicity, spending £30,000 in those days to publicise the Eagle comic. Such was the success of the publicity that the first issue of the Eagle comic came out on the 14th of April 1950 and was the first of something like 991 of the original issues. There were various characters in the Eagle comic, but the one who's the most famous, of course, is Dander, the pilot of the future, and there he is resplendent in his uniform, which is based on Frank Hampson's army uniform, but with different rank markings and in a lighter shade of green. He got involved with all sorts of escapades, did Dan, using a lot of the different planets as backgrounds. His first escapade, I believe, was a mission to Venus, where he had to avert a worldwide food crisis. And this rang true amongst the World War II kids, because they'd seen what the World War food shortages were like. So the magazine took off tremendously, and within a couple of years they were looking at selling 1 million copies a week. The magazine was very high quality, the artwork was spectacularly good, and Frank Hampson was revered around Fleet Street for his high quality artwork. But Dander, he was the hero, and he was just what the Reverend Marcus Morris wanted. He was a man that children could look up to. He had discipline, obviously, because of his uniform status. He was their hero. He was a decent man. He never lied. He never fought with anybody, and he upheld true Christian values. With such an interesting hero, it was natural that toy manufacturers wanted a slice of the action. So a great many toys of all different types were made under the Dander name. And I'd like now to show you just some of the toys which are upcoming in our next sale. So here we are back again, looking at the Dander toys that are in the sale on the 23rd of April this year. One of a large number of toys sales that we have, as people know, every month. There's a great deal of variety, and as we said previously, this one has a section where there's an awful lot of Dander toys inside. We've mentioned the brief history of Dander. I'd like to show you now some of the toys we have available and the products associated with Dander, which might give you an insight into the character that was dreamt up, of course, by the Reverend Marcus Morris. Here, of course, we've got the Eagle magazine, and it was the Eagle magazine. We call it a comic, but interestingly, the two people, Marcus Morris and Frank Hampson, who created the Eagle magazine, never called it a comic. They always referred to it as a magazine. And this one here is the very first issue. This is the 14th of April 1950, issue number 1. And it went on then in that form till about 1969. And it's been coming out on and off in various forms ever since, I believe. Interestingly, at the time, from about 1950 to the mid-50s, there was also a daily radio show featuring Dander on the radio, on Radio Luxembourg, 208 metres, medium wave. But whether you can still get that now or not, I don't know. You can see the high quality colour, and when you compare it to contemporary comics of the time, this was leaps ahead. It was far better quality, and it fired the imagination of children, and this is what the Reverend Marcus Morris wanted to do. So moving on, I'll give you an example of some of the other items that we have with the Eagle comic there in the background. You can see again the high quality and the relatively low cost of 4pence halfpenny, which is about 2p in modern money. Here, if I may show you, is a vintage Dander pop-up book featuring our hero, the pilot of the future. These were quite rare, featuring some of the space station, some of the escapades that he gets involved with, the space fleet, one of the vehicles, a Rota cruiser, more pictures of the vehicles. Interestingly, Frank Hampson, the illustrator for Dander in the Eagle, he made a point of making highly detailed models, and they kept them in the former bakery that they used to create Dander. And whenever he had to do an illustration featuring the vehicles, he'd look at the model so that he got the illustration dead right. He was also well known for getting actors to stand and lie in poses so that his illustrations would be lifelike. Well, you get an idea there. Okay, so that's a pop-up book. We talked about the Eagle. Here is another toy that's an example. If you look at the front there, it's the Eagle projector. There were two versions of this. One was ready-made, like this one, and the other one was a kit. You could put it together. The emphasis being on children of the late 40s and early 50s who, let's face it, didn't have iPhones, didn't have a television set, didn't have devices, but they were encouraged to make things. Some of the slides of the time. Okay, moving on. Here we have a selection of modern items of Dander that have been reissued recently, and a very interesting Dander biography recently produced with an introduction by Terry Jones. That's quite good. And then looking at some of the toys that are necessary for children to be creative. are the oil painting by numbers, and then a junior stencil set. Also, we've got a Dander stamp album. One of these has been used, the other one hasn't. There you are. I don't know if there's any penny blacks in there or not. Contrast that with a more recent 12-inch figure of Dander. And there he is in all his finery. Moving on again, some of the weapons that they invented for use in the and these diecast pistols featured quite a lot in the stories. They fire the old percussion caps. Again, we've got a space bagatelle, the Dander theme, some eagle related plastic kits for building model ships. Again, we've got tying in with the construction theme for children to get used to making kits. It's also a good advertisement for the Eagle magazine. Encouraging kids to have hobbies. Here we have model aircraft, model boats, and an interesting booklet featuring, I'll show you a better example here, where this was to build a model of the Anastasia, which was Dander's ship that he travelled on through space. And here you can see, unused, all these cut out parts to make a card model of that ship. Moving on again further, a space shooting game. We've got various jigsaw puzzles such as that. Again, some here, some have already been ready made up, showing some of the escapades that they get into. More accessories, film strip and viewer, Dander telescope, more guns, field glasses, the sort of things that featured in the story of the time. We've also got one of several books. This is a supersonic gun, plastic, battery operated, fired a beam of light here with instructions in its use. Again, all these featured in the magazines. A very rare spaceship kit made by the Jetex jet propelled toy manufacturers. Once again, we've got the walkie-talkies, very popular toy at the time for budding space captains to speak to each other. More guns, another one that fires rotary missiles, and then we're back to more of the projectors. There's one similar to the one we saw originally, and there is one to encourage children to make their own, and it's a construction outfit with parts inside to make your own in detail. A father and son project. Briefly, we've got more guns. That's actually a projector, although it looks like a gun. Another one here, which is known as the rocket gun. A very popular toy in its time. I think a lot of these were made. And this is the Dander radio station with accessories. But that one's not as complete as the one in the next lot, which also has its box and is a bit more complete. We've got a Dander Spaceship. This one is the template toy made by Meccano, a UK manufacturer, friction drive, and quite a lot of those were produced. We do get them from time to time. But some of these Dander toys we've never actually seen before. Another interesting one is similar to Meccano is the Dander Spaceship builder set, and there is an example of a template bolt together rocket using the imagination of the builder, and it's made in the same way of Meccano. And I think really, apart from our last cosmic ray gun, then a tri-beam no less, that's the end of our brief resume of the Dander toys that are coming up on the 23rd of